I'm Mary Draper, an extension agent with the University of Tennessee. As you traveled through the Upper Cumberland with Chris and Katie, you saw how extension agents and Friends of Extension were cultivating communities through agriculture. In this mini-series, we're going to focus on the family by looking into food, fitness, and finances. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Cultivating Communities Family Focus. In this episode, we're going to focus on finances as we have Dina Wise to come talk to us about something that we probably all have a goal to do one day, retire. We also are well underway into our 2021 tax season, so we have Alan Galloway to share tax tips with us. And we're going to make a convenient recipe. Join us for this episode of Cultivating Communities Family Focus. We're here with Dina Wise, who is a retired family and consumer sciences specialist, and she has recently retired. Dina, can you tell us from your experience, let's say you were talking to somebody my age in their 20s. From your experience, can you tell us a little bit about what maybe you would have done differently in your experiences?
Yes. Of course, since I am retired, I don't speak as an extension specialist, but I can just tell you sort of my personal experience with retirement.
Absolutely.
So the first thing I would have done differently is definitely I would have started planning earlier. I mean, immediately after I entered my career, I would have started planning for retirement because I just didn't realize how quickly things go. You know, you said that you were away from retirement before we started filming, but those years pass so quickly, and you're so busy with other things, so it's really important to start early.
Okay, so is there any mistakes that you might have made when you were planning for retirement?
I think, well, my biggest mistake was not starting as soon as I did, and I think the other mistake that I made is just that I invested too conservatively. I've always not been much of a risk taker, and actually that seems to be common among women for one thing, and I think people who aren't that involved in the financial community, and I did it. I would have been a lot more comfortable in my retirement if I had taken a few more risks.
Yes.
When I was investing.
Very good. So is there anything that you did right whenever you were planning for retirement?
One thing I think I did right is that I have always, and my husband and I have always lived very frugally. We've never owned a new car. We, didn't spend money on buying a lot of things. We still have a lot of furniture in the house that we had at the very beginning, or maybe that was handed down from our parents or that we bought at a thrift shop. So living frugally, I think, is one thing that I did right. I think the other thing is that I did, toward the end of my career, I really actively saved for retirement. Well, let me start back even farther than that. When one thing that I did was I was conscious about the middle of my career that I had to increase my income if I was going to have a secure retirement. So I did something that probably nobody should have done and nobody recommends. I took a good bit of money out of my retirement account when I was working for Extension, left it for a while and got a PhD. And use that money. But it did, when I went back into the workplace, it almost doubled my income. So it paid off in a few years, even though it was a risk.
Yes.
So I had done that, and then the other thing I knew was that when I did go back into the system, because I had spent all that retirement money, I really had to make it a priority to find a job that had a good retirement plan, and maximize that plan.
Yes.
So then immediately before I retired, I I started really concentrating on savings. I worked, I don't know if you're aware of it, but when you reach full Social Security age, you can draw Social Security and work with no penalty from your Social Security. So I did that for 2 years, and I actually practiced being retired in that I took all of the extra money that I had beyond what I figured out what my income would be in retirement. And I took all the rest of the money that I was making for the last 2 years and put it into my retirement fund. So what that did was kind of maximize that fund for the last few years. And so that worked well, and that, that helped me meet my goals for retirement at the end, even though I was behind.
Yes, so you kind of talked about your goals and setting those goals and how you prepared for that. So I think a big question with anybody would be, how much do I need to save for retirement? So how did you personally know when you were financially able to retire, or how did that process work for you?
Well, I had set some goals, but my goals weren't as, I think they weren't as high as is recommended when you go on online sites and figure out your retirement, partially because those goals were just out of reach for me. But one advantage that I knew that I would have a consistent retirement income. So if I had been on a 401k, dependent entirely on a 401k or an IRA to fund my retirement, I would have had to have been more careful about, having more in savings. But because I knew I would have a portion of my income replaced through Social Security and my retirement with UT Extension, then I was able to save a little less. So I had several $1,000s, and but it was maybe 2/3 of what those recommended sites would recommend to replace, and it wasn't enough to replace my income. We're living on half of my income now, so it's a change.
Yes, it is. So Dina has given us a lot of good advice today, and the biggest takeaway, I think, for me is to start early. So start now if you haven't in your 20s, because I've always heard that's when you have the most to gain. And maybe now is a time, too, that we talked about this, that we could probably be a little bit more aggressive with our investments. So depending on the person, I'm not the type that is probably aggressive either. I'm more frugal. I need to plan ahead. But those are all kinds of good advice, and we appreciate you coming down and speaking with us, Dina. We're here with Alan Galloway, and Alan, why don't you tell us about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Okay, as she said, I'm Alan Galloway. I'm an area farm management specialist with UT Extension, and I'm also the agricultural income tax program coordinator for the state of Tennessee Extension.
Okay, so we're here and we're going to talk about the 2021 tax season. So since you work, in the farm management area, how about we talk about what kind of things should farmers expect versus individuals in their taxes?
Well, that's a good question, because it does change a little bit when you're trying to do the taxes. Obviously, an individual or a small family, they typically only have to worry about their W-2s and some of those basic credits and deductions that they might qualify for when they're trying to do their taxes, so it wouldn't be as complicated. But a farmer's obviously got a lot more records that's going to be involved, because he's running a business. So you've got all those calculations of what those expenses are, the feed, the seed, the fertilizer, whatever it may be that they've included as part of their farm expenses. And then, of course, they've got to keep track of all that income as well to report it accurately. And then there may be additional credits or deductions that a business qualifies for that an individual would not. So it takes a good bit more quality of records to make sure that they're getting the right information to their tax preparer to ensure that they're getting the right programs, the right forms, all of that sort of thing that they qualify for, and keeping their taxes as low as possible.
So from the Family and Consumer Science perspective, and as a parent, can you tell me about the child tax credit this season?
Okay, and we do have a unique challenge with the child tax credit this year. Many families have received a letter from the IRS because they increased the child tax credit for 2021. It went from $2,000 to either $3,000 per child or $3,600 per child for a child that's 5 years of age or under. So they increased it substantially, and then on top of that, they gave it part of the payment in advance. So from July through December, many families received monthly payments for each child that they already had listed on their taxes. So they got either $150 to $180 per month per child, unless they opted out and chose not to receive the money in advance. That would give them half of the child tax credit that they will receive when they file their taxes that they're working on now. So that means that they'll either get $1,500 or another $1,800 per child for that. So that'll get the rest of the child tax credit. So as far as that goes, now if they had a child that was born in 2021, they didn't get any of that advance money for that child. So that means if obviously that child would be under 5 years of age, so they'd get the full $3,600 for that child. They got a letter probably from the IRS stating how much they got in advance. It's very important that they give that letter to their tax preparer to make sure that it matches up, one, with the amount they actually received. They need to double check their bank account or their checks that they got and make sure they actually got all the money that the IRS says they did. The IRS has admitted they've had a few with mistakes, so that could be an issue. And if you send in an amount different from what it says in those letters, it's possible that it might delay you getting your refund or your tax return being processed. So it does complicate things a little bit this year. One of the other things that everybody needs to keep in mind, while we got that wonderful increase in that child tax credit this year, unless Congress passes another law, the child tax credit goes back down to $2,000 for 2022. So, and there's no provisions for getting anything in advance this year. So it'll change things when we file our taxes again next year, because we'll actually be getting less than we are this year, there again, unless they pass some new legislation.
Okay, so we've talked about the child tax credit, which is one change this tax season. Is there anything else that's changed from 2021 that we should be aware of that changed from 2020 to 2021?
We've got a couple. Number one is a lot of us got stimulus money, just about everybody practically, in 2021. Most folks, if they qualified, got $1,400 per person. The IRS has also sent out letter number 6475, that tells you how much money you got as part of the stimulus money. There again, you need to double check that that was the right amount too. And in most cases, those have been accurate. Again, if they had a child born during 2021, they didn't get stimulus money for that child that they do qualify for. So a child born in 21 gets that family would get another $1,400 for that child. So it could be it's a win-win year if you've got little children this year for sure.
Yes, my Ellie, win-win for her.
Yeah, good thing for Ellie. One of the other things I do want to mention that's a little bit of a change from past years is last year they allowed folks that use the standard deduction, which most of us do now. Very few folks itemize their deductions. But if you're using the standard deduction, typically you didn't get any credit for charitable contributions, donations to your church or the fire department or the rescue squad, that sort of thing. Well, last year they did include a chance to get a $300 credit. They increased it this year. Last year it was strange. It was $300 per person or $300 per couple, which didn't really seem fair. So this year they fixed that. So the taxes we're filing now for 2021, it's for cash contributions. So if you donated clothing or something like that, that doesn't qualify. But if you had cash contributions to a qualified charity, you can get a $300 deduction per single person or $600 per couple. And so that's, that saves another $60 plus on your taxes at least. So it's another nice little thing that changed this year.
Okay, great. So something that my husband and I have thought before, and I'm sure a lot of people have thought of, so what are your views about doing something as an individual versus getting a professional to do taxes? So pros and cons there.
Pros and cons, and that's always a great debate. For somebody that is, I guess, acclimated or inclined to dealing with financial matters, or you have an interest in that way, it's possible for an individual or a couple to file their own taxes. In many cases, depending upon their income level, they may be able to do the filing for free through the IRS website. And many of the software companies that are out there that you can purchase, of course, they also have a system for, depending there again on your income level, of using their software online for free to do your taxes. And of course, if you're using their software, they may try to sell you some upgrades or something like that you do have to watch for. One has to be careful, obviously, because the tax code is very complicated. There's nobody that understands all of it, I don't think. And with things like our uniqueness in the child tax credit and other things this year that might throw you for a loop, it might be worth using a professional in many cases, because those professionals go to extra training each year. Most of them are required to have extra training each year so that they are updated on the tax laws and the changes, and know what things to look for and to remind folks of as far as the records that are needed, that sort of thing. Sometimes, obviously it's going to cost more if you pay a professional to do your taxes, but many times they may find credits or deductions you didn't know about or wouldn't have been aware of that might offset the majority of what they would charge, plus it saves you the hassle of doing it too. I mean, for some folks it's just not fun trying to work through a tax return or filling out the forms.
Yes.
And for folks that had challenges in 2019 or 2020 filing their tax returns, a lot of those returns that they had errors on got delayed because of COVID and the IRS processing those, and there's been many people that did not get refunds for many, many months because of them doing their own taxes and maybe making a mistake where maybe a professional wouldn't have made those same errors.
Very good. So we appreciate Alan being here, and I know that I've learned something like the extra $1,400 for my daughter being born in 2021. So we hope that you've learned things as well. And remember that the tax season for 2021, the deadline is April the 18th.
That's correct.
Unless there's a national disaster in your area, correct?
Right. That is correct.
Alrighty, we appreciate y'all. I'm the mom of a beautiful 6-month baby, so these days are pretty busy. But isn't everybody's day pretty busy? Whether you're traveling a lot or have a demanding job or a busy parent like me, you might not always have time to think about dinner and cooking. So it's no surprise that on average, Americans eat 6 convenience foods a day. So when you're thinking about convenient foods, lots of times we might think about a granola bar or a yogurt. Other times we might not as really think about things like spices or soup mixes. So today we're going to talk about how we can make those things into a convenient dinner. Okay, we're here in the kitchen, and today we're making green chili chicken over asparagus. So I always have my recipe handy because even if you've been cooking for 30 years, it's easy to leave out an ingredient if you're not really readily thinking about it. So I have my ingredient list here, my recipes. The first thing that we're gonna do is heat up our tablespoon of vegetable oil. So I've done that. And we are going to get our chicken. We need 4 chicken breasts, and we're gonna sprinkle it with Creole seasoning. So we need about a tablespoon of Creole seasoning, and we're gonna sprinkle each one with that on both sides. And when we're talking about convenience foods, we wanna think about healthy choices as well. So we are making a healthy choice with our asparagus and our chicken. Good things to do also, I like rotisserie chicken a lot. So sometimes most of the fat is found in the skin of the rotisserie chicken. So you can just skin that And then that takes away most of the fat and a lot of the sodium. And then you can have that to add with, add that to tacos or salads or casseroles. And we're gonna let this cook for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. Okay, so now that we've let this cook for 2 to 3 minutes on each side, we're gonna turn it down to medium-low. We're gonna add our asparagus and let this cook on medium-low. While we're doing that, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about asparagus. When you're choosing asparagus, you wanna make sure that the heads are closely tied together, because as they age, they will loosen up. And when you have asparagus, it's really good to go ahead and use it after you purchase, because it loses its sweetness as soon as it's picked. So if you have it for a couple of days, a good idea is to cut off the bottoms just like you would with a bouquet of flowers, and then put it in about an inch or 2 of water in a cup, and then have a plastic bag over it to put in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. And you don't want to cook asparagus in cast iron either, because it will react, and so it could cause discoloration in the cast iron in the asparagus. While this is cooking, we're going to get our sauce ready. So we have 3/4 cup of broth, 3/4 cup of sour cream, and we have our dry soup mix. This is broccoli soup mix, and it's more convenient, and if you can buy it in one of those 1 1/4 packets, but for today's purpose, I measured it out, and we're gonna whisk those together. So this is at just a boil. I'm gonna turn it down, and then I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of capers, and also 1 5-ounce can of green chilies. We're gonna let this simmer for a couple minutes, and our chicken and asparagus should be ready. We're gonna check it with a food thermometer to make sure it's 165, and then we're gonna get 2 plates out to serve it up. So we made green chili chicken over asparagus today, and I just wanted to conclude by saying some of the things about convenience foods when we're making those choices. We just want to be mindful about healthier decisions, because convenience foods can sometimes be less healthy. So when you're picking things like beans, a good idea when you're using those beans is to rinse the sodium, or rinse the beans so that they have lower sodium. It lowers it by 40%, and you can use those beans in things like burritos and tacos and all kinds of good things. So we hope you enjoyed cooking with us today, and we'll see you next time.